Today we're going to continue our work with hundredths. Specifically, we'll continue reading and writing hundredths in decimal and fractional forms. We're also going to look at the value of digits again today according to their place. So that's how we'll show our evidence of learning at the end. A reminder that hundredths were focused on this place to the right of the decimal point. It's got a THS at the end, compared to hundreds, which is to the left of the decimal point. So the place of each digit, of course, affects its value. And so that's something we're going to pay particular attention to today. Now, if we just do a quick review and write this amount of the green shaded in both decimal and fractional forms, what would you write? What would that look like based on what we've learned? 11/100ths as a fraction is what this green shows. This whole is like a flat for base 10 blocks. This whole has 100 little cubes in it. So each row would be worth 10 cubes, and then one more would give us 11/100ths. Now as a decimal, that would look like 0.11, but I read it in the same way that I do the fraction. So I would read this number as 0 and 11/100ths. How about this one? What would you write? Pause and write, and then we'll compare. Did you get 48/100ths? So 10, 20, 30, 40, and then 8 more little cubes being read. So that's 48/100ths. What does that look like as a decimal? Did you write 0.48? Also read 0 and 48/100ths. So the place of each digit, as we know, represents its value. So if I have this fraction and I want to write it as a decimal, that means I have one whole, 5/10ths, because if I were to visualize a big flat, that means there would be 5 rows filled in. So 5/10ths and 3/100ths. There would be, after those 5 rows, there would be 3 little cubes. So 1 and 53/100ths as a fraction would be written as 1 and 53/100ths as a decimal. If I've got 147/100ths, how would I write that as a decimal, according to what we know? Well, how many cubes are in a whole? For every 100 cubes, I have one whole, right? So that would mean I have one whole. And then how many, if I take out that 100, I would have 47/100ths left. So how would I write that as a decimal? 1 and 47/100ths. Notice I read these the same. 1 and 47/100ths, 1 and 47/100ths. What would 2 and 75/100ths look like as a decimal? Did you write 2.75? Read 2 and 75/100ths, just as the fraction is read. How about this? What would this improper fraction look like as a decimal? Remember that every 100 100ths is one whole. So that would mean I have one whole. And then how many hundredths left? If I take out that 100 hundredths, I have 3 hundredths left. So how would I write that as a decimal? That 3 hundredths, did you get into the hundredths place? Because remember, this is the tenths place. So if I only have 3 hundredths, I need to make sure I write that in the hundredths place. If I wrote 1 3/10, remember that that has a different value. That would mean 3 whole rows of a flat would be colored in. But in this case, if I only have 3 hundredths, that means I only have 3 little cubes filled in. So this 0 is a placeholder. That means I have 0 tenths and I have 3 hundredths. So 1 3/100 is the proper decimal form of this number. How about 204 hundredths? What would that look like as a decimal? So pause and write. So we've got 2 sets of hundreds here. So that would mean 2 wholes. And how many hundreds left? 4 hundredths. Therefore, 2 4 hundredths. Did you get that 4 into the right place? Its value is only 4 hundredths, so we need to make sure it's in the hundredths place. 2 4 hundredths. So we learned this with tenths as well, and we're going to revisit with hundredths, looking at the value of digits according to their place. So if I've got this number 78 41 hundredths, we see a 7 in the tens place, an 8 in the ones place, a 4 in the tenths place, and a 1 in the hundredths place. So 7 tens, 8 ones, 4 tenths, and 1 hundredth. So if I think about the value of each of those, 7 tens has the value of 70. 8 ones has the value of 8. 4 tenths has the value of 4 tenths as a fraction, and 1 hundredth has the value of 1 hundredth as a fraction. So keeping all of those places in mind, what would you write for the values of 20 and 39 hundredths? How many tens are there? How many ones? How many tenths? And how many hundredths? So 2 tens would have the value of 20. There are 0 ones, so I can leave that out. It has the value of 0. 3 tenths would have the value of 3 tenths as a fraction, and 9 hundredths would have the value of 9 hundredths as the fraction. So in expanded form, we would say 20 and 39 hundredths is equivalent to 20 plus 3 tenths plus 9 hundredths. I've broken apart each of the places and looked at the value of each place. You do the same here. Write this number in expanded form. So pause and do that. Come back and check. 3 tens would have the value of 30. 1 would be a value of 1. 9 tenths and 3 hundredths. Did you get the value of each of those digits? This is 31 and 93 hundredths written in expanded form. How about 8 and 7/100ths? What would that look like in expanded form? 8 ones would have a value of 8. There aren't any tenths, so I can leave that out. And there are 7/100ths. Did you get hundredths? Because this is the hundredths place. Remember, we've got tenths right after the decimal, and then hundredths. So making sure I've written the correct value of the 7, it's 7/100ths. How about 56 and 78/100ths? What would that look like in expanded form? Pause and write and come back and check. 5/10ths has a value of 50. 6/1s has a value of 6. 7/10ths has a value of 7/10ths. And then 8/100ths. How did you do? How about this one? 102 and 100th. Did you get 100 plus 2 plus 100th, since this is in the hundredths place? This is 102 and 100th written in expanded form. Today, third graders, to continue this practice of hundredths in decimal and fractional form, along with place value, a couple of ways you can practice are to continue with the Quizlet. That's a lot of vocabulary work. There's also IXL skill today, specifically on place value, so that might be a great one to check out. And then after some practice, go ahead back to Seesaw and show your learning today with the hundredths day 2 activity there.